Welcome to the Pastor Scott Show. Call Pastor Scott now at 888-528-2557. That's 888-528-2557. And now, here's Pastor Scott.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am back from vacation. Great to be with you on the Pastor Scott Show. Go to pastorscottshow.com to connect with us online. Phone number if you want to call and join the conversation, because we're live today. I am back. It's 888-528-2557. 888-528-2557. We talk about issues of the day from a Christian perspective. Let's go to 16-1.
I don't know. I think we're going to maybe get something, but I want to give them every last chance before decapitation. Very tough to do what we have planned, still planned. We'll see what happens. But it's a very, very tough thing to do. I think I'm very proud of the fact that I'll give people a chance. This is a big move. To do an attack that big on a country, I'd rather not do it. Now, we've already, through lots of large attacks, but they were normal large. Hopefully they'll come to their senses, because what happened cannot have a nuclear weapon, but hopefully they'll come to their senses. So they called me and they said, please don't attack, we'll make a deal. That's the real truth, and everyone knows it. And who wouldn't call?
That was President Trump today talking about the fact that he has once again put a pause on the war in Iran, delaying military action, saying that he wants to avoid unnecessary killing and giving diplomacy another chance. At the same time, Iran is denying that they are talking or that there's any sort of negotiation going on. Trump says they're happening tomorrow, and there's a whole lot of back and forth in the usuals about that. Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this while I've been gone. Had some conversations with my 17-year-old son about military option to join the military, those kinds of things while I was on vacation. And when I'm hearing President Trump speak, he's talking a lot about the fact that there is a lot of death and a lot of terrible things that happens when it comes to this. Now, as you've listened to me, I don't believe that there's any agreement that the Iranian government is ever going to agree to. I think that it's naive to think they're going to negotiate fairly or that they're going to keep any agreement that they ultimately make. I think that has never been something they have done. It's something that we've seen repeatedly, and I don't like it. And many people today are criticizing the president because, once again, we are backing off, negotiating, and those kinds of things. But on the other side of it, there is the notion that says, well, how many times, especially when you're talking about ultimately what is killing people, how many times do you go back for peace? How many times when somebody that you're dealing with is not trustworthy, and they're not trustworthy, and you don't really have a good reason to believe that they're going to be worthy of your trust somehow this next time, how many times do you keep coming back? Is it worth avoiding war by taking the risk that your enemy is lying to you, that you're going to just go to war later and it's going to be harder? What do you think about this? What are your thoughts about Iran, where that is right now, what's happening in the war, and what do you do when you have somebody that you're dealing with? Maybe you've had something in your life where you're not talking about life and death, but somebody who you can't trust, and yet you're in some position where you either have to make the hard choice and do whatever that means, whether it's tough love or disconnecting with somebody, kicking them out of the house, those kinds of things, or giving them another chance just to see if they will come through. Maybe you've had an experience like that. 888-528-2557, 888-528-2557. Some of the remarks that the president has been saying today and this weekend, he's talked a lot about people dying, and what he's described is an attack that was going to happen that he claims is the largest attack since World War II. I don't know what that means. As far as the, how do you measure that? Well, it would seem like that's pretty big. I mean, we've had the Iraq War, a lot of big stuff happening over that. Vietnam, a lot of stuff happening there. Bombs are bigger. There's a whole lot, probably a lot of nuance to how you would phrase that. What does he mean by that. But whatever it means, it does mean that there will be dying, and there will be Iranians who are killed. There will be civilians who are killed. There will be American soldiers who are killed, most likely, in the process of all that. Maybe people in other countries, the surrounding countries, as they keep getting bombed. So President Trump says he doesn't want to do a lot of killing. Go to 16-2.
And they found out through leaks and sleazebags, a lot of sleazebags, leakers. Leakers should be put in jail. They have to strengthen up the laws for leakers. But in this case, leakers helped because they said the severity of the attack, and Iran knew it. They knew what was coming. It was going to come last night, and it would have gone on for a long time, and there'd be essentially very little left. There'd be nothing left. And if I'm given a chance to let a lot of people live, I want to give that chance. So I'm under no time constraint. I don't happen to be running, but a lot of very good Republicans are running.
It's interesting that, in his normal way of doing things, he kind of goes, back and forth in different things. But he keeps bringing up the idea of a lot of people are dying. I don't want that to happen. Of course, there at the end, he talks about the politics of it. It's an election year. Midterms are coming. Very likely possible that his party would lose control of the House of Representatives. That would change a lot probably for the next 2 years and what that looks like. And many Republicans are frustrated with the Iran war, and they're on different pages. But I'm wondering what you think about this. And by the way, he mentions that thing right there about, hey, he's not running, just for those of you who think that he's still running.
Well, you got an attitude with you, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, he's not running, never has been running, okay, for a third term. So in his mind, there's kind of this dual thing going on politically. One is you got an election coming up. A lot of people have thought, I've even thought that maybe he is going to delay the major attack till after the election, because you never know how that's going to turn out. That could turn out really good, right? The way the politics of war is, if you're successful, if you win, then everybody's positive about it. But if it's not successful, or if the impression is, even if it's technically successful, if the impression is if it's not successful, then it wasn't worth it and people don't support you. So there's a lot of unanswered questions, a lot of unforeseen circumstances when it comes to war, that he would wait. The idea is he'd wait till afterward. And then sometimes it seems like he doesn't care because he's not running. He's the president. Really, a lot of presidents, what they think about politically is, at this point in their term, is what is the future going to say about them? What are historians going to say? And that's often a very helpful thing because it helps you make a better decision in the moment. Do you believe that the current Iranian regime should be given another chance to come to the table and negotiate something? Or do you believe that that's just too late? If you were president and you had this kind of weight on you, going to war, people dying, would you continue to give your enemy another chance, even when most people say that they shouldn't? They shouldn't have one. 888-528-2557. 888-528-2557. I've been thinking a lot about that, just because the interesting thing is when you think about the long term, what people are going to look back 10, 15, 20, 30, 50 years from now, and they look on this period of time. You don't, all the nuance of the day-to-day stuff that happens in our politics is lost forever. Nobody cares. Most of it, it's resolved, whatever questions are there. And what happens next, or how things work themselves out, is kind of what people look at, what kinds of decisions were made. Plus, we don't even know everything right now. Things come out later. Like you've been hearing with the Dr. Fauci stuff and what he was writing in his diary, which is totally different than what he was saying out loud, right, in 2020. But that was 6 years ago. Imagine what we're going to know 15 years from now about all that stuff when most people have passed away. It takes some time. So if you're really thinking about the future, you think about and how you might be remembered or what a decision's impact would be. If you care about that, you're going to try to make the best decision. And you often just don't know. I said once to my son, I really would love to be around 100 years from now to know what are they going to think 100 years from now about this era right now, because we live in some crazy times. I mean, don't you think so? I think
now,
we do.
Who can argue with that?
888-528-2557. This is the Pastor Scott Show. We're back live after a week off. Go to PastorScottShow.com to follow us online, PastorScottShow.com to follow us online. I'm talking about the war in Iran and the pause that the president is giving for another round of negotiations. And a lot of skepticism about that, a lot of different opinions. But I wonder, Have you ever trusted someone who didn't deserve another chance and that worked out? Like, have you ever thought this person in my life is never going to do the right thing? And those are hard questions because sometimes it's family, it can be a kid or it could be a parent. And yet you're in a position where it matters. You have to make some decision about their life. Maybe it's a punishment or maybe it's a change in the relationship status where you just keep saying, well, maybe they'll get better. Maybe this will change. Have you ever done that where it worked out, where you were glad that you trusted somebody or glad that maybe somebody trusted you? Maybe you're on that end of it. And you finally came through, even though you were plenty guilty about whatever. How should we view this kind of thing, even the war, as people who want to follow Christ? Whether it be the war in Iran and those kinds of big issues like that, or whether it's just interpersonal conflict that we might have with enemies or with people who maybe you wouldn't say they're enemies, but people who are causing you a lot of strife in your life. 888-528-2557. 888-528-2557 is the number. Pastor Scott Show live. Let's go to 1111.
We'll just see how it is. We're ready to go anytime we want. Would I rather make a deal? I'm not looking to kill people. Because people die. A lot of people die. And we don't want that.
That is President Trump yesterday making the same remark. Not looking to kill people. That has to weigh on any president, right? It's not just the death that is your own soldiers. It's the death of everybody that is caused, by a decision that you make, even if that decision is necessary. Because there are times when you have to go to war. There's a time for war, time for peace. There's a time when you have to say you're done, right? Imagine if Winston Churchill had not stood up to Adolf Hitler. And if you know your history in that period of time, England was getting ready to just have a peace deal. They wanted peace in our time. It's a famous Chamberlain quote, and he's not looked upon friendly by history at all. Chamberlain isn't, because he looked at the situation and misjudged it, thought that maybe Hitler would be trustworthy, got a signature on a piece of paper, held it up in the sky, and Hitler was at the exact same time planning to bomb London. And Hitler didn't mean it at all, not at all. There was no reason to trust Adolf Hitler. And Churchill knew it, but it was a fight to stand up to that guy. There is a time when you have to say enough is enough and you're going to head into war. There are times where that's just necessary. And then there are other times where maybe war could have or should have been avoided. Maybe there was a time for more negotiation that didn't happen before. Maybe it was something that was really crucial that you would be a part of, that you should have negotiated a little bit further. Have you ever trusted someone who didn't deserve another chance? Have you ever regretted not giving someone another opportunity that they should have had? What's harder, knowing when to let go, when to stop trusting, or when to give another chance? I think that it's an interesting question. It's a hard question. It's one that you face in the big issues like a war. It's one that you face in the normal day-to-day issues of our lives. This is the Pastor Scott Show. Go to pastorscottshow.com, pastorscottshow.com. Phone number is 888-528-2557, 888-528-2557. Go to 12.
I said, what would you rather do? Would you rather have us do this or not? They said, we would much prefer a deal as opposed to an attack, because you don't know where these attacks lead. I mean, will they be flooded with people pouring into their country and disaster? A lot of bad things can happen. Yes.
He's talking about this, and that's one of the things that you have to think about. There's always consequences that are later. You go to war, and you're talking about refugee crisis, the type of war that he's talking about. Right now, and I was having this conversation with somebody last week, is that it's interesting that we don't see people fleeing out of Iran. They probably want to, and maybe there are, many people are, but they're kind of trapped. It's a much bigger country. The geography is such that there's not a lot of places to go that would be any safer. But if you have this kind of war, World War II style attack, I don't know how big we're talking about, but what the president seems to be indicating is that the attack that was put off is something that would be devastating. But then if you're the surrounding countries, you're saying, well, who's going to deal with the starving people? Who's going to deal with the people who are leaving and fleeing and the refugees? And that hasn't gone too well for lots of places around the world. 888-528-2557, 888-528-2557. Pastor Scott Show. Norma in California, welcome to the Pastor Scott Show.
Yes. Hello.
Hi, Norma. Go ahead.
Well, yes, I was going to say that, a long time ago, I lost totally, confidence and trust of my husband, but I decided to give him, to give him another chance, and I forgave everything he did, and, nobody's perfect. And after that, I decided to just be in peace and have harmony in our lives, and it just went well till the day he died. Yeah.
Now, did he ever repent of what he was doing wrong, or what happened there?
He told me, yes. He said yes, and but it was just yeah. Well, I think some people they lie about everything.
Yeah.
And but it was a compulsive lie. Yeah, but I decided to trust God instead, and I guess we had a good life, I guess, and decided to give him the benefit of the doubt, and that I know that he never did it again, but he kept lying about other things.
It's hard to trust someone. So how did you manage that? It's, a marriage, you walking away is a whole nother thing, right? So
what I did, it was I tried to be, like, I used to get mad, yeah, but not really like fighting all the time, because that's not healthy.
yeah.
And it's not a good marriage to be fighting all the time. So yeah, I try. You have to understand sometimes that people go through a lot, and the way they were born and live in a different environment, and I believe that. Many times he said that he didn't want to do wrong, but it was just always about it was not a big things like cheating on me, but it was something about financial things. So
yeah,
it was hard. It was hard.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And some people never learn how to manage money. And I think I made a big mistake. Instead of getting mad, I should have took things and do it on my own. Like some women, they rather do all the payments, and they take all the financial stuff, and they can manage better.
Well, that's one of the things that happens a lot in marriage, right?
I regretted not doing that instead of complaining.
Yeah.
But I will tell everybody, people who's going through that, like, do that instead of, if he doesn't know how to manage, if you can do it, do it.
Yep, there are some solutions. Norma, I appreciate you sharing that story there. 888-528-2557. A lot of couples go through that. Some people call it financial adultery. I don't really like that, because it's not really adultery, but it is a dishonesty, right? It is something that betrays trust when one spouse is spending a bunch of money and hiding it from the other one, right? And I'm not talking about you went out to lunch today and didn't budget for that, or those kind. I'm talking about really big things, like you got stuff going on the side, and you have separate bank accounts that your wife or your husband doesn't know about, those kinds of things. One of the answers, like she said, is that you have to sometimes, when you don't trust somebody, you have to move into trust but verify. If you really want that to happen. And that's one of the keys, even when it comes to international politics, right? Is that what happens if some agreement gets signed in Iran, and part of it is we're going to get rid of our nuclear materials? Well, no one's going to believe that unless there is a very good independent way to verify all of that. It's because they're not trustworthy. 888-528-2557 is the phone number, 888-528-2557. I'm reminded by Norma's call, Romans 12:18, as far as it is, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with anyone. Live at peace with everyone, it says. That doesn't mean that everything is going to be right, or that other person suddenly becomes trustworthy, or that you ignore, what they're doing. And you heard her say, I should have taken more accountability for the finances. I should have verified what was going on, because he was never trustworthy, sounds like, her husband there. But at the same time, she took this position. As far as it depends on her, I'm going to try to live at peace. That's easier said than done sometimes when you're working with somebody who's not trustworthy. If you ever had an experience with somebody where you knew they're not trustworthy, but you decided to give them another chance, and how did that work out? Did it work out well? Or maybe you were the one who wasn't trustworthy and somebody gave you another chance. How did that work out? When do you know you just have to be done? What do you do when it is time to say enough is enough? And some kind of action has to be taken to confront a issue of trust that you might have with a person. That's kind of where we are with that Iran war, right? And then, the interesting thing I was going to say, and we'll go to break here in a second, then I'll get your calls here. When you look to the future and what people are going to think, if we have some big, huge war, people are going to want to know in the future, how much time did you spend negotiating? And that might work in the favor of the president taking too much time with us. All right, 888-528-2557. This is the Pastor Scott Show. Go to PastorScottShow.com. We'll be right back with your calls. Stay tuned.
The Pastor Scott Show returns in 4 minutes. The Pastor Scott Show returns in 3 minutes and 30 seconds. The Pastor Scott Show returns in 3 minutes. The Pastor Scott Show returns in 2 minutes and 30 seconds. The Pastor Scott Show returns in 2 minutes. The Pastor Scott Show returns in 1 minute and 30 seconds. The Pastor Scott Show returns in 1 minute. Pastor Scott Show returns in 30 seconds. The Pastor Scott Show returns in 15 seconds. The Pastor Scott Show returns in 5 seconds. Welcome back to the Pastor Scott Show.
You made me think about hospitality and compassion.
Call Pastor Scott now at 888-528-2557. That's 888-528-2557. Now back to Pastor Scott.
It's Pastor Scott Show. We're live. It's Monday edition. We are live, back from vacation. Great to be with you. Go to pastorscottshow.com. Phone number is 888-528-2557, 16-1.
I don't know. I think we're going to maybe get something, but I want to give them every last chance before decapitation. Very tough to do what we have planned, still planned. We'll see what happens. But it's a very, very tough thing to do. I think I'm very proud of the fact that I'll give people a chance. This is a big move. To do an attack that big on a country, I'd rather not do it. Now, we've already, through lots of large attacks, but they were normal large. Hopefully they'll come to their senses, because what happened cannot have a nuclear weapon, but hopefully they'll come to their senses. So they called me.
That is President Trump today talking about why he is going back to potential negotiations with Iran. There's a lot of back and forth about people disagreeing, or people saying he's chickening out, people saying that they're untrustworthy, and why don't we know that? At the same time, the question is, how many times do you give someone a chance, even when you know they're untrustworthy? And I thought about that for even our own lives. We have situations in our lives, sometimes in our families, other places where you know somebody is untrustworthy, that they always lie or they never follow through, whatever it is. And yet you live with them, you work with them, you have them in your family. You can't just pretend it's not there. You're going to have to deal with something. So at what point do you actually say, you know what? When do you decide that someone doesn't deserve another chance? What are some ways to navigate that? 888-528-2557. 888-528-2557. Rose in L.A., welcome to the Pastor Scott Show.
Yes, Pastor Scott. It's kind of hard to go through that when someone is constantly doing that, but we have to remember it says we need to forgive 7 times. We know the scriptures.
7 times 70.
Yes, 7 times 70. So we gotta remember that part. But this is when you put God in it. This is when you begin to put God in it. You have a strong talk with that person, and let that person know, I'm going to go with you on this situation that you want to do, and if you mess this up, then I'm just going to have to just believe God from this point on, and not just continue to trust you, and you keep leading me wrong, having me going in the wrong place, or things keep happening wrong, and we're not, things ain't working right. So we have to trust in God, believe God, and put God in it strongly. I mean, strongly. God, I know, you know all about this person more than I do, God. You know this person from when they was in the parents' womb, and I need you to help me with this situation. Is this the person that I need to be with, or need to trust, and need to be around, and need to hang with, or marry, or whatever? Is this that person? If not, I need you to just move him out of my life and let me move on. You got to talk to God about that.
Yeah,
God can help you out with that. And that's the way I feel on that one.
I think it's super good advice to go to God and be honest that this person that I'm dealing with is not trustworthy. I don't trust them at all. Sometimes we don't trust people and our reasoning is wrong, right? But most of the time we've got a pretty good idea why they're not trustworthy.
Right.
And then God, I think, will help us. You have to do something. I don't think it's good for them or for you to ignore it.
Yeah, a lot of times people don't put God in everything they do, and you know we're special when we're churchy, we're Christians and all of that. All of us know that we're churchy. We the ones that's on this line. We know we're churchy. Put God in what you do. Stop just doing what you're doing and expect for it to go your way. Put God in it.
Yeah,
Put
Rose.
Him first.
Yeah.
And then you say, okay, God, if this is for me, allow it to happen. We run to God after we done did all of this. But we need to run to God at first.
Yeah, that's right.
God.
Rose, we got to do that with everything. Thank you for that. 888-528-2557, 888-528-2557. She was saying that. I think, how often do we deal with these things, but we don't actually pray? And what I mean by actually pray is maybe you say quick little prayers to God about things, or maybe you just say, hey, God, help me with this situation. Help me know what to do. But how often do you really pray? Like, get down on your knees and pray through circumstances with what to do. I'll tell you what, and I'll tell you as a pastor, I've had to deal with all kinds of different things professionally or even just helping other people where I'm not the one involved in the conflict, but I'm mediating it, right? I'm in a lot of those. It has been better every time when I have taken the time to be on my knees in prayer and asking God, what in the world should I do here? Right? Or asking God to reveal something that needs to be revealed so that whatever decision needs to be made would just be very clear to everyone. And I'll tell you what, the times when I've really prayed well over things, God does it. And sometimes I think that with gifts of, discernment and other things, the Lord is still working through us and things like that. But we should not underestimate the power of prayer and what it means to really have that conversation with the Lord and really listen to what the Lord and really give things to the Lord, particularly when it comes to our relationships with other people and the things going on. Because I do think that there is a very tangible truth and experience to asking God for wisdom, as James tells us, and getting it, even when we're not very wise people some of the time, right? That to really do it and not just sort of tip our hat. That would be something I would ask you when you're in a situation. And I know that many of you are great prayers, and it takes a long time for things to sort of work out and what to do. But you've got to do something, and prayer is a part of it. All right, 888-528-2557. We're talking about the issue of when do you decide, that somebody is untrustworthy and you have to do something. How do you decide, okay, I'm not going to trust them again with something. I am going to either, maybe the circumstance is I need to quit my job because my boss isn't trustworthy. Or maybe the circumstance is that I need to fire an employee because they're not trustworthy. When is the circumstance that I'm in a marriage and we're going to have to confront this, or it's going to destroy our marriage or destroy our life, and we've got to deal with this? How do you know? How do you understand when it is time to do that? And have you ever trusted someone who didn't deserve another chance, but you gave them one anyway? How did that turn out? Did it turn out well? Or were you disappointed again later? Or maybe you were that person and someone gave you another chance and you didn't deserve it. Maybe you have regretted not giving someone another opportunity. I started thinking about this, if you're just joining us, because of the Iran war and what's happening there. And the president has once again apparently stopped a large attack that was coming today, and negotiations back on the table. Many people are critical of that, saying Iran is not completely trustworthy. President Trump says, yeah, but we, want to give every opportunity before we kill a lot of people. Okay, but you can always say that. Right? You can always say that, and then, at some point it's too late. World history has shown us that at some point we have trusted leaders. Usually it's called appeasement, right? Where you trust too long and then they destroy you. How do you know that even I thought about this. I thought, we deal with this in our own lives all the time. How does that work for you? 888-528-2557, 888-528-2557. Don in L.A., welcome to the Pastor Scott Show.
Yeah, Scott, as far as like personal relations go, I think a lot of it depends upon who you're dealing with. Some relations you can't walk away from very easily, like family relations. Other people you can, and it depends upon your radar detector, that sort of thing. The old saying, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me.
Yeah.
people hate to be played for fools and that sort of thing. So it depends upon your temperament, how merciful you are. Some people are very, very long-suffering. But I wanted to kind of get back to that original question of this, how this ties into Donald Trump and Iran, because this is a very big question that affects all of us. And, if we keep talking about it, we assume Iran is the one that's so untrustworthy. And yet 2 times within a space of 1 year, they sat down to negotiate with us, and their top leadership, and I think including the guy across the table, ends up dead. So, why should they trust us? I don't blame them, quite frankly.
Well, they've been untrustworthy, though, for 50 years. So, there's probably plenty of reason for them not to trust us. I would say that's.
Benjamin Netanyahu came to the United States Congress in 2003 saying, I swear up and down, Saddam Hussein has nuclear weapons, no question whatsoever, no question. He put on a big theatrical show, and it turned out he was wrong. He's been doing this for decades, but because the Iranians are just liars, but the Iranians.
Okay, so in the situation where everybody's a liar, you still find yourself in a situation where you've got to do something. I mean, for a president, whatever he has done or whatever he has inherited in that relationship with the Iranians, what's more dangerous, acting too soon and starting an unnecessary war, or waiting too long and allowing for a greater war that becomes inevitable?
Well, I agree, but the deed is done, and we're already in this. And my advice would be to cut your losses and leave. The problem is that Iran's demanding that the U.S. abandon the Middle East and the 35 bases we built.
Well, that's never going to happen, right? So.
Because of Israel, yeah.
No, it's not because of Israel. Don't go there, Don. Come on, Don. All right. There are so many reasons that build into mistrust. Even what he's saying or what people say about Israel stuff. Most of the stuff that people say isn't even true. It's made up. And that's one of the things that happens when you're dealing with international relationships and media and stuff. Don't trust everything. We're going to talk about who are the experts and who do you trust in the next hour, actually. When it comes to personal relationships, sometimes things are complicated. Sometimes not everybody has been trustworthy or everybody has been unhealthy. So how do you navigate that? Scripturally speaking, you come back to the truth. Wherever you've been, wherever things are, you've got to come back to what is true. And then you've got to recognize that you have to put God in there and realize that there's a bigger picture. There's a lot more to say, but I'm coming up against a break here. Phone number is 888-528-2557, 888-528-2557. It's Pastor Scott Show. We're live on Monday. Go to pastorscottshow.com to connect with us online, pastorscottshow.com. Follow us online. We'll be back as the Monday edition of the Pastor Scott Show continues. Hey, you know what? I just took a vacation, and one of the best parts about it is I slept great, and so did my wife. And one of the reasons is because I went to go see Dr. Eddie Simon about 2 years ago to deal with my sleep apnea and snoring and everything that comes along with it. And so I brought the special miracle device that Dr. Simon made for me to my vacation. And it fits perfectly in my mouth. It moves my jaw and my tongue in the right position. It's comfortable. I sleep well all night, and it stopped my snoring. It puts my tongue and jaw and everything in the right position, opens up my airway. I breathe great. I sleep great, stops the snoring, and I don't need to use a CPAP mask. It is a great thing if you got sleep apnea. This could work for you, and I would invite you to call Dr. Eddie Simon. He's right here in Los Angeles. 800-92-SMILE is the phone number. That's 800-927-6453, or go to tmjexpert.com online. Call Dr. Eddie Simon at 800-92-SMILE and tell him that Pastor Scott sent you. All right, we'll be right back. Stay tuned.
The Pastor Scott Show returns in 3 minutes. The Pastor Scott Show returns in 2 minutes and 30 seconds. The Pastor Scott Show returns in 2 minutes. The Pastor Scott Show returns in 1 minute and 30 seconds. The Pastor Scott Show returns in 1 minute. The Pastor Scott Show returns in 30 seconds. The Pastor Scott Show returns in 15 seconds. The Pastor Scott Show returns in 5 seconds. Welcome back to the Pastor Scott Show.
Hey, Pastor Scott, I love your show always, and I have my little radio sitting right next to my chair that is the Pastor Scott radio.
Call Pastor Scott now at 888-528-2557. Now back to Pastor Scott.
Welcome back, everybody. Pastor Scott Show back live. Great to be with you today. 888-528-2557 is the number if you want to join the conversation. 888-528-2557. PastorScottShow.com. I'll get your calls here in just a second. Hey, if you're looking for a way to protect your retirement in these uncertain times, then I want to tell you about Sanctuary Metals. Sanctuary Metals specializes in helping you move part of your IRA or 401k into physical gold and silver, not just paper investments that rise and fall with the stock market. And if you've got an old retirement account, maybe from a previous employer, or if you're over 59 and a half, you might be able to roll it over with no taxes or penalties if you qualify. The best part is it only takes about 15 minutes to get started. Their team walks you through everything right over the phone. They handle the paperwork, they're the custodian of all of it, and your metals are stored safely in IRS-approved vaults, which I like because then you don't have to hide it in your mattress or something. Call Sanctuary Metals today at 800-801-9877, 800-801-9877. When you call, make sure you tell them Pastor Scott sent you to see if you qualify for a no-fee-for-life precious metals IRA. You can learn more online at sanctuarymetals.com. Phone number again is 800-801-9877. Past performance does not guarantee future results. All right, Pastor Scott Show. We're talking about when do you trust people or when is it too late? When do you say enough is enough? How do you navigate that? And, we started by talking about that with the international issue, the war in Iran, and Trump taking a pause on the war again, saying that maybe a deal is coming. And what he says is Saudi Arabia and Qatar and other countries said, hey, we want to make a deal. We think that we're able to make a deal. Okay, so we're not going to attack anymore. It seems like we've done this 7 or 8 times, right, over the last few months during all of this. People have a lot of different opinions about it. But the other issue is, at some point, you have to stop negotiating, and that's true in war and peace, but it's also true in personal relationships. When do you know it's time? Have you had a good experience with that? We're always called to forgive, and it's not the same as trust, though. Forgiveness doesn't mean I'm just going to ignore the fact that you're a liar, or that I'm going to ignore whatever history has been there that doesn't seem like there's going to be any change. Jesus would not entrust himself, to certain people, even though he knew all people. He knew that we were going to be sinners. It was clear that there would be a crucifixion, that the same people who were celebrating him on Sunday would crucify him on Friday. That, he already knew that that trust was going to be broken, whatever was there. So how do we do that? How do we offer grace, but still require repentance for a restored relationship? I think that's really, really important. 888-528-2557. Our last caller was, bringing, Israel into it, and it's Israel's fault and all this and that. I would just remind, when you think about trust and things that are out there, let's just say there is no Israel, there's no nation of Israel. Would we still be having wars in the Middle East today? Everything else being the same, would we still have wars in the Middle East today? And the answer to that is yes. The same reason that we're having wars in the Middle East today, we've been having those wars for 1,000 years. And Israel wasn't a country for 900 and some of those years. Do you understand that? That if, for people out there who just want to always blame Israel for things, okay, let's take Israel off the table for a minute. For 1,000 years, the same battle has been going on. And that leads to that same question. When you say, should Donald Trump trust the Iranians, why should he? People who have had that ideology have been without trust and have been violent for 1,000 years. That's just a fact. That is a historical fact. And I think that's something that leads into the mistrust, that it's not just the individuals who are there today, it's the ideologies that people hold, right? There's all kinds of things. And in personal relationships with people, sometimes people have just been dirty for years, forever. And sometimes there's all kinds of reasons, to mistrust people. But still, you got to deal with it. At some point, you've got to make a decision. How do you do that when the behavior is not really changing? 888-528-2557. David in West LA, welcome to the Pastor Scott Show.
Hi, Pastor Scott.
Hi, David.
To me, trust has to be based on past behavior. I mean, not one incident, but I think in the Middle East, the problem is you've got Netanyahu, Trump, and Iran. None of them are trustworthy.
Okay, but I just said, I don't know if you heard it, but
finish.
1,000 years this has been going on. That's a long time before Netanyahu, Trump. It's not, nothing's, it's the same thing.
We had World War I, and we had the slicing up of the Middle East.
Uh-huh.
The kind of wars they're having, the kind of wars since the Iraq War, no. Those are all new.
No, none of it. This stuff has been going on. Different players except for one. There's one player who's been the same for 1,000 years.
Who's that?
The Islamic fundamentalists. Same thing for 1,000 years. Going to war.
Well,
all the way back to the Crusades. All the way back before that.
That's an oversimplification. I mean, there were more Jews living in Islamic countries for 2,000 years.
That's right. And where are they now?
They got along fine. Oh, now I think.
Did they?
Well, look, I'm not.
Why did they get kicked out as soon as that opportunity happened?
Well, no. They got kicked out as soon as Israel happened.
No.
Now, again, I'm not anti-Israel. No. Listen, I support Israel. It's a democracy. I'm not anti-Israel, but I'm just saying I think Israel has not recently has not been a trustworthy player. I'm not equating them as a.
But right now we're talking about the U.S. and Iran. I realize Israel's there, but we're the great Satan. They're the lesser Satan, according to the Iranian leaders. So between us and Iran, when do you, if you're the president, I don't mean Trump, any president, when do you say enough is enough after 50 years of this relationship?
Truthfully, I think Trump is in over his head. He's got to deal with.
Okay, but any president, what should Trump do? You get a chance to say, Mr. President, for the sake of all of us, do this.
He needs to get experienced diplomats, not Kushner and the other person. No, there needs to. This is a very difficult area. It always has been. So I think we need experienced diplomats that are very experienced in negotiating in the Middle East. I think that's been missing. I really do. I don't think we have.
Has it been missing the whole 50 years? Because the problem's not resolved.
Well, Well, you like to downplay the JCPOA. That was an agreement. You don't think it was a good agreement?
No, I thought it was a terrible agreement.
Well,
I
you
think
might have
every
thought
agreement
so,
we've
but-
probably made, including the Trump agreements, have been bad agreements.
Well, I don't think that.
Except for the fact that you have to do
that.
something, right? So you have a series of bad agreements with different presidents, different people. At some point, when do you say we're not doing this anymore?
Well, at the point where it looks like you're making things much worse. Strait of Hormuz is closed. There's no way we're putting ground troops into Iran. There's no way we're going to attack civilian infrastructure because it's a country of 30, 40.
I'd like to agree with you, but I'm not sure that that's the case.
I'll be willing to bet any money no troops are going into Iran.
Well, I'm not going to bet you on any of that, but
well, troops are never going into Iran. It's treacherous.
it would be a huge war. It would be a huge war.
Huge war, and it would throw the whole Middle East into chaos. So,
David, we're getting a little bit off track of the trust issue.
No, not really. Because I think in this situation where there's a lack of trust, you need diplomats.
Okay.
You need the best diplomats you have. You know something?
Okay.
That's the only alternative because I don't think armed intervention is an alternative. I'm telling you,
Okay.
that's my opinion.
All right, David. Thanks for calling the Pastor Scott Show with that. So he would say you need diplomats. We've had a lot of diplomats. Not too sure that's worked out too well. But, if we personalize it a little bit, sometimes there's a time, right? And maybe it's a time to fire the diplomats because obviously there's, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes, really. And that's, I think, always something that's important. You don't really know. But it doesn't look like anything has worked out. So I don't like the diplomats of the Obama deal. I don't like the diplomats of other deals. When you go back and you talk to the Jimmy Carter diplomats during the hostage crisis, all of them said the same thing. They kept promising things and we'd make agreements or we'd make progress and then they would cut out. That's because that's what they do. That's how that works. We can talk about this forever, but I think one of the things when we think about it in personal life is that we never should stop being willing to forgive or stop praying for peace or doing our part. But we shouldn't confuse forgiveness with pretending that trust has been restored. And sometimes in our life, we have to cut people off, right? Or we have to do the tough love. We have to kick people out. Sometimes in international politics, you have to go to war. I hope David's right that we're not going to war over there. But you know what? If they're going to pursue nuclear weapons, they intend to use it. At some point, if something's not resolved, we are going to war there eventually with boots on the ground, the whole shebang. I think that's an inevitability, whether it be this year or it be 100 years from now. That's coming. And that's because of 1,000 years of the same discussion. It's just that nuclear weapons change everything, and especially people willing to use it. Anyway, this can go all sorts of different directions, and we're about out of time. But, whether it's Iran or your family or business partner or a friend who's broken your trust, don't do nothing. Sometimes you bring in the diplomats, like he said, maybe you need to go to counseling. Make that decision. Just do it. Go see your pastor. Go see your counseling group at your church. Go see somebody to talk you through things. Hey, we have mistrust when it comes to our finances and our marriage. Hey, you know what? I'm working at this place and I don't trust my boss. I had a boss one time that I had to go confront. And I'll tell you what, it worked really well because he thought a bunch of stuff about me that wasn't true. And I thought stuff about him that wasn't true. And that conversation actually helped restore trust because it turned out in that case, neither one of us were really mistrustful. But there was a third party in all of that who was telling each of us all the mistrustful things. And it exposed all of that. The point is you have to take action at some point when it comes to these things. All right, we're going to take a break here in a minute. It's Pastor Scott Show, and I'm glad to be back from vacation. I want to thank John Fuller and Steve Wilburn and Pastor Ron Hill for being here. We'll talk about that maybe a little bit more in the next hour. When we come back, we're going to talk about the experts, kind of maybe in a way from David's call to talk about how do you trust the experts? How do you know when the experts are the ones you ought to be trusting? How do you deal with that? This is the Pastor Scott Show, 888-528-2557. Go to pastorscottshow.com to connect with us online, pastorscottshow.com. We'll be back as the Monday edition of the Pastor Scott Show continues live. Stay tuned.
The Pastor Scott Show returns in 4 minutes. The Pastor Scott Show returns in 3 minutes and 30 seconds.
You are the HHS Secretary.
The Pastor Scott Show returns in 3 minutes. The Pastor Scott Show returns in 2 minutes and 30 seconds. The Pastor Scott Show returns in 2 minutes. The Pastor Scott Show returns in 1 minute and 30 seconds. The Pastor Scott Show returns in 1 minute. The Pastor Scott Show returns in 30 seconds. The Pastor Scott Show returns in 15 seconds. The Pastor Scott Show returns in 5 seconds. Welcome to the Pastor Scott Show. Call Pastor Scott now at 888-528-2557. That's 888-528-2557. And now, here's Pastor Scott.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's the Pastor Scott Show. Yes, I am back live. Great to be with you today on this fine Monday. Go to PastorScottShow.com, PastorScottShow.com to connect with us online. Phone number to join the conversation, 888-528-2557. We talk about issues of the day from a Christian perspective. Clip 2-1.
You are the HHS secretary, and you are talking about things that lead to vaccine hesitancy in this country. And it is something that causes problems for people when there is not anything.
Let me ask you something. Do you see your job as ending vaccine hesitancy, or do you see your job as telling the truth to the American people?
I see my job as telling the truth, and the truth is that there is study after study after study. It's one of the most studied things out there in science.
You're repeating
and it
it like a parrot. You're repeating it like a parrot. I've actually read the science. Let's you don't want to come back here and debate the science.
I'm not debating this with you.
Of course you won't.
No, because I'm not
all
debating.
All you know how to do is repeat things that people told you and say, trust the experts. That's what you did during COVID.
That was part of a conversation on CNN with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Health and Human Services Secretary, and Dana Bash on CNN that went in this direction of talking about the experts. And right now, that it kind of started with the idea of the measles outbreaks, and he pointed out that, hey, there's worse measles outbreaks in Canada and some other places, and what's happening is the politics of it is they're trying to blame RFK for different things and people's attitude towards vaccines coming up out of the COVID.
They really should wear the mask.
Well, he went after her on the subject of trust in the media, trust in the data, especially in light of the Dr. Fauci diary that got released last week. I don't know if you saw that, but it's very controversial because, number one, probably it's controversial releasing the guy's notes, but he did his own personal diary. And there's all kinds of stuff in there that is, I don't want to say shocking, but unfortunately confirming of some of the worst concerns of Mr. Fauci. Anyway, the biggest piece of it was many things that he said in there about the COVID virus that contradicted the things he was saying on television. And it had to do with a great many things. So these writings from Dr. Fauci appear to show something a lot more complicated behind the scenes: uncertainty, internal disagreement, political pressure, practical considerations and decisions that weren't based on scientific evidence at all. Some of that we already know, right? The mask thing and other stuff, eventually they said, well, we just sort of said those things.
They really should wear the mask.
The whole 6 feet thing. Remember the circles that you had to stand in the elevator and go in one direction or the other in the walkway of the supermarket? That had no scientific basis whatsoever, turns out. So, it doesn't mean that every recommendation was wrong. And certainly it doesn't take away the seriousness of people who really did get COVID or really did pass away because of COVID. I know 2 people who died of COVID. That's what they died of. And so it's a very serious thing for a lot of people. However, when you're talking about trusting the experts without questioning them, and when you are told you're a bad person for questioning the experts, and it turns out you should have questioned the experts, then it raises this question: who are the experts? And how do you trust the experts? So my question for you today is, who do you trust and why? When an expert speaks, do you trust the degree that they have? Do you trust the school that they went to? You know how your doctors always put up their diplomas on the wall? Do you ever read those? I do. And I wonder, I suppose certain medical schools have a certain reputation with some people where it sort of matters. But I've gotten to the point where I don't know that matters at all to me. I guess it matters to me that you graduated. I think I'd rather see a transcript, right? I'd rather know what grades you got. You know what? What do they call, Jose, what do they call a doctor who graduated last in his class? What do they call him?
I don't know.
They call him a doctor. See, that's right. The guy who cheated to get along, who barely made it, doesn't really know anatomy, doesn't really know anything, but somehow he got a C-. He's your doctor right there. He's got the same thing up on the wall. It doesn't say magna cum laude or something, but graduated.
I live by this motto: C's get degrees.
That's right. So how do you know who to trust? Is it the institution? Is it the evidence? And what's the evidence? Is it the record? And it goes beyond issues of public health, like we're talking about here. How do you decide what pastor to trust? How do you decide what Bible teacher to trust? How do you decide really what news organization do you trust to tell you the truth? What social media personality? What financial expert? How do you learn? How do you decide who to trust? What causes you to trust somebody or maybe causes you to stop trusting them at some point? 888-528-2557. This conversation between R.F. Kennedy Jr. and Dana Bash was this whole conversation about trust going back to the COVID. Go to 22.
Now we know that Anthony Fauci, who was the expert, was lying about everything, about masks, about social distancing, about natural immunity, about the transmission from the vaccine, about the source of COVID. He was lying, and you were punishing people for not trusting the experts. And now you're rolling out the experts again to talk about something that you have no personal knowledge of.
Okay, well, guess what? That is my job, to talk to people.
Your job is to
Am I
tell the
allowed
truth
to talk?
to the American
Yes,
public.
yes. And my job is to get as much information as I can. And what we were doing,
skepticism,
what we were doing in COVID and still, with regard to these vaccines, is getting the best information, the best science that we can, and putting it out there. And sir, what you are doing is causing information to be out there that is not accurate.
Who was lying to you?
That just goes on and on, that whole conversation. And he's talking about the experts. She's saying we trusted the experts. Well, the experts were lying. We know about certain things. In Fauci's diary, he actually says in January, this might be one of the biggest points of controversy that has come out of that. In January of 2020, they knew that the first infection was not connected to that wet market where they claimed somebody ate a bat. Like, they already knew. That was, January. We were still not even paying much attention to COVID in January. He wrote that in his diary. In February 1st, on a call with scientists, Dr. Fauci, 2020, he wrote in his diary that most of the scientists did not rule out a deliberate insertion, meaning that the COVID virus was put out there on purpose or accidentally from a lab. Only a minority of the scientists on that call favored natural origin. But publicly, Fauci said, no, natural origin. No, people eat this natural spillover. And so we know that the experts, I remember all the trust the science. I think you should trust the science as long as it's science. But you have to question the scientists. That's what I came out of that with a lot, is that, hey, you know what? I want to trust my doctor. I do. But I'm going to question my doctor. I'm going to get a second opinion. If you get diagnosed with something, it's totally worth getting a second opinion. Or if somebody gives you a treatment plan for something, hopefully your doctor is giving you the best thing. But you know what? It is okay to go ask somebody else. I don't mean go in and ask an AI. Ask somebody else, another doctor. You can make an appointment and say, hey, I'm going to get a second opinion. And maybe your insurance won't cover that, so go in and pay for it. It'll probably cost you $100 just to get the opinion from somebody else. It is worth it. So how do you know who to trust? 888-528-2557. 888-528-2557. Mark and El Segundo, welcome to the Pastor Scott Show.
Hi, Pastor Scott. Always great to talk to you. Excellent subject. I go by my own life experiences. I go by history. I don't believe there are so-called experts unless you go ahead and validate them or validate their information. When COVID hit, I knew the mask was a joke, because I had taught chemical warfare in the military for over 20 years. So the masks were a soft seal. The air gets in and out through the sides, the top. Unless you have a mask that's a hard seal, it's going to get in there. It's a microbe. The best way to get rid of a virus is to get it. And I can tell you a quick little story on that. But I go by history. When I was a kid, we had the mumps, measles, and chicken pox, and I got all three of them. We had immunity parties. The best way to get rid of it was to get it. I felt sick a few months ago. I went to the urgent care. I had a really smart doctor, and she says, I would test you for COVID, but we haven't had COVID patients in a couple of years. And I told her, well, you know why? I said, I know why. She says, how do you know why? I said, because everybody got COVID. That's why. So that proves my point right there. I think vaccines are trash because what happens on vaccines is there are dozens of strains out there, and if you don't have the vaccine for those strains, it's going to be ineffective.
What about things like polio? I mean, polio went away, or smallpox vaccine. They came out of that. Those things went away. Most people think some vaccines work.
The smallpox, it almost killed an entire nation of people. And this is another word, this is more American history. And they didn't have vaccines back then. So you know how the Native Americans conquered smallpox? They got it. That's how they conquered it. They built up their bodies, built up the immunities. They finally
Well,
got
I just
used
wanted to
the
push
people.
back a little bit on the thing like the polio vaccine, for example.
That one I would have to research. But
I'm not worried about polio. Like it used to be, if your kids are walking home from school, you tell them don't stomp in a puddle because you might get polio in the water. That was a real threat.
Yeah. They also said that the COVID virus could be on a doorknob.
Well, the COVID is the part of the example, right? Is that most of what got said about the COVID was not correct.
I knew that from the very beginning.
But how do you know that? So what I want to get at here is not to relitigate just the COVID, but just basically, how do you trust that your doctor is telling you the right thing, or that your financial analyst, or even your pastor is interpreting the scriptures appropriately? What is your test for that?
Yeah, I do research. I have a condition. I've had 12 doctors and been to 7 hospitals, and I'm headed to Mayo Clinic, and I'm really sick. I know more about what I have than the doctors do. So you do research. I read Johns Hopkins, MD Anderson.
So you educate yourself so that you're able to have a higher level conversation or critique.
I'm treating myself. Honestly, Pastor Scott, I really don't need them unless I've been shot or I need brain surgery or heart surgery, because I can treat myself. I'm just as smart as they are. The only thing that I can't do is prescribe drugs. I have a huge book from the American Medical Association that's got every single drug in the world, what it's for, its side effects, everything. I just can't prescribe my own medicine.
So what you're saying is that you would trust yourself you're the expert. You make yourself the expert.
Oh, I go do the research, because when you go to a doctor, they have to see dozens of patients. They're inundated. They're so busy. And so when they get home, they're exhausted. And, they want to spend time with their family. I'm a single guy. And I work with, satellite, space telescopes, NASA. So I read. I do research.
But most people can't do that, or they're not going to spend the time doing it. They have to go to the doctor. Most people, you've got to make an appointment. You've got to go to the doctor. At some point, you got to trust what they're going to say to you.
Yeah,
so how does the normal person? I want to move on, because that's the question I'm going to ask. And Mark, appreciate your call. Mark will trust in himself, his own research. He's going to study all of that, and the information is out there. That you can do a lot. But how do you know you're not being influenced by politics, for example? That was one of the things that was a big deal in the COVID era. In fact, in another interview, I'm going to go to 5-1 here. In another era, or in another interview, remember Dr. Bricks? She's not Dr. Fauci. She's the other lady who was always up in those daily things. Well, she's talking about the politics and how that affected how many things happened with politics. Go to 5, or with the COVID, 5-1.
When President Trump said to me, we will never close down America again, as what happened, in which I couldn't understand how that happened so rapidly. We put out guidelines to slow the spread, and the next thing we know, everything is closed down. Now I know that Dr. Fauci was having private conversations with these governors and mayors to tell them to close the schools, and to tell them, while we were trying to figure out how to contain the virus without doing all of that.
So she's talking about one of the things that came out in the Fauci diary is that he was behind the president's back. This is in 2020, talking directly to governors about why they need to shut down the schools and other stuff. He was very involved in that, apparently. But what she's going on to talk about is how serious the politics were in 2020 because of the election coming on. 5-2.
There were solutions, but it became very political, and we all have to be aware, because it was a presidential election year, it was really important for blue states to show that they were taking it very seriously, and they overclosed. And we just have to be honest that that happened. And that's why that discussion from both sides of the aisle and a resolution and a way to go forward is critical so that we can do this right in the future.
You know, I remember when the first time I was going out to Arizona during the COVID, and I called my mom. She lives in Arizona. And she said, you need to come out here to a free state. And if you aren't aware about how open some other states were, if you're in California and you didn't go to Arizona or you didn't go to Florida or some other states, it was shocking. I think it was May, maybe it was June. I think it was May or June. I go out. As soon as you get to Yuma, across the border, I went into Yuma. No mask. Gas station had a sign just asking people to get along, but telling you that they're not requiring anybody to wear masks and just respect each other, that kind of thing. Totally different. It was a little bit locked down in the Phoenix area, but it was just, you immediately cross the border, completely different. And all that was politics. It wasn't science. It was politics. So how do you trust the experts? This is the Pastor Scott Show, 888-528-2557. 888-528-2557 is the phone number, 888-528-2557. So how do ordinary people evaluate experts when we lack the knowledge to independently verify everything they tell us, or we lack the time to go get it, or sometimes we don't have the skills? I worry about, our caller Mark. He's a scientist and he's reading the books and okay, but, do your own research has also become kind of a joke, right? Because people end up with a Facebook degree, right? Your research is, I read all these Facebook posts. I mean, look at all the stuff that's put out there on social media right now about politics, about medicine, about, I follow all of these like heart doctors on social media, and they're fighting back and forth about things that people who are not doctors, who've never been to medical school, are saying about, heart medicine, statins, and all of that. And, you read this and go, man, what kind of influence do people have out there who really are saying, this is the thing. Like for me, one of the things I look for is the person giving me a judgment, or are they giving me the facts? Like, is their opinion that this is the best idea for my money, or for an interpretation of a Bible passage, or for something medical? Is it their best judgment, or are they telling me the facts? Like, there's a difference between those two things. When I try to look at how to trust somebody, I want to know, is that actually a fact? Like, you can't argue that, or is it just judgment? And I think one of the things that's scary today is that people are making judgments often with no facts, or even contrary to the facts today, on a whole lot of stuff. And people will accept it, though, as facts, even though it's just somebody's judgment. So how do you know who to trust? Like, how do you make that decision? 888-528-2557, 888-528-2557. I think that's a big deal, because the expertise, how do you trust the news media that you watch? If you watch Fox News and then you turn it over to MS Now, you're watching two different countries, right? It's not the same. You're not getting, sometimes they're not even talking about the same thing. And when they are talking about the same thing, you're getting a completely different perspective. How much of that is judgment? How much of that is fact? And how do you determine that? Like, how do you do that? 888-528-2557, 888-528-2557. One of the things that also we were reminded in the COVID period was the media. And, I would like to think that all of my people, the reporters, journalists, are really being journalists. But it turns out that a lot of them are just news readers. They just read whatever is put in front of them, right? Remember this video? This will be number 17. These are newscasters who all came out to tell you that there's all kinds of fake news about the COVID. And this is what they had to say. These are news broadcasters from across the country in 2020.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our Treasure Valley communities, the El Paso, Las Cruces communities, Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But we are concerned about the trouble and irresponsible, one-sided news stories plaguing our country.
Plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and
False news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish the stories without checking facts first. Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal...
And that just goes on and on. And what you have are dozens of news broadcasters from across the country in different cities, different networks, reading exactly the same thing and making the exact same statement. And much of what they had to say there was not even accurate. How do you know who to trust? What is your process for that? How do you trust and why? When an expert speaks, do you trust their degree? Is it the degree on the wall, where they went to school, their political persuasion? How do you have confidence in that? And even from a Christian perspective, how do you trust a Bible teacher, small group leader, somebody that you're watching online or listening to on the radio? How do you judge that? 888-528-2557. 888-528-2557. Pastor Scott Show, we're live. It's Monday. Great to be with you today. We'll be back as the Pastor Scott Show continues. Stay tuned.
The Pastor Scott Show returns in 4 minutes. The Pastor Scott Show returns in 3 minutes and 30 seconds. The Pastor Scott Show returns in 3 minutes. The Pastor Scott Show returns in 2 minutes and 30 seconds. The Pastor Scott Show returns in 2 minutes. The Pastor Scott Show returns in 1 minute and 30 seconds. The Pastor Scott Show returns in 1 minute. Pastor Scott Show returns in 30 seconds. The Pastor Scott Show returns in 15 seconds. The Pastor Scott Show returns in 5 seconds. Welcome back to the Pastor Scott Show.
Hey, man, God bless you, Pastor Scott.
Call Pastor Scott now at 888-528-2557. That's 888-528-2557. Now back to Pastor Scott.
Welcome back, everybody. Pastor Scott Show. We're live on Monday, 888-528-2557, 888-528-2557, 23-1.
He was caught in actual lies. He was telling people, and the big issue to me is the origin of this, which is very important. How did it start? And he was telling people up front when it first began, it was from the wet markets. It could not, that's a conspiracy theory. If you say it escaped from the lab. And he knew better because we have him in his diary telling us what he was saying to other scientists who were saying, no, absolutely. And the real issue here is the gain of function research. Yeah. And again, if we weren't so partisan, we could just say, gain of function research, Obama told him not to do it. I would always have said, don't do it. But it's a viable debate. It's a reasonable debate. Should we soup up something that's bad, this bacteria, to study it? Maybe if it got out, it would be even worse. I think that's what did happen.
That was Bill Maher talking about the Fauci diaries that got released. And we're talking about how do you know who to trust? So it brought back the whole idea of who are the experts and why are we trusting? And it matters because in the COVID, we had shutdowns of schools and universities and churches, businesses, the whole country shut down for a period of time. And then you had different things happening in different states. And when these diaries got published here last week, you know, one of the things that Fauci liked to tell people is that he repeatedly stated that he didn't recommend locking things down and that he wasn't responsible for school closures and that he had urged reopening schools quickly and safely. But the diary contradicts that completely. In fact, the diary says he was calling cities and governors saying, shut down your schools and your businesses. And so it's caused just a lot of reminder that how do you know who to trust? Because you need experts, right? You need people who are better at understanding things. You need doctors, you need lawyers, you need journalists, you need writers, you need people who are financial analysts, you need people who are tax professionals, right? All of those things. You need people who are better than you at things. So how do you evaluate who the experts are? You need pastors, you need teachers. How do you know who to trust? How do you measure that? 888-528-2557, 888-528-2557, Pastor Scott Show. Emilio in Orange County, welcome to the Pastor Scott Show.
Hi, Pastor Scott. Thanks for taking my call.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So, you talked about you're talking about trust, and you mentioned COVID. I got COVID really, really bad. It almost killed me. I was in the hospital for 2 weeks. But the thing is, the experts, they pumped me with stuff that gave me a whole slew of other problems. Yeah, and there was no way of knowing, like you said, they're the experts.
I mean, sometimes you just have to trust, right? Because when you got COVID, we didn't know everything. Hey, how early on did you get it? Was it early on?
Yeah, it was early on. Yeah. I got it in December of 19, I think it was, or 20.
Oh, you got it really early.
Now. Yeah.
Yeah, so we knew hardly anything.
Yeah, and my family couldn't come in to see me. I was all by myself for 2 weeks. Ugh. It was, my lifeline was my phone that I had, so yeah, that was helpful. But they pumped me full of remdesivir, which, come to find out, it was bad for my heart. And so, one of the doctors, I had 5 doctors on me. One of the doctors, she offered me, what's that one? Ivermectin.
Yeah.
And so ivermectin, come to find out, is one of the best things you can take now. But hindsight's 20/20. There's no way of knowing. And the issue of trust, I'm a person of faith. My whole family is. So we leaned on that. and we decided, you know what, let's not take the remdesivir because we read the side effects, and it went on at page after page after page on side effects. So we made our best guesstimate, and we said, okay, we're not going to take it. Had I taken it, I probably would have been in the hospital for maybe a week or maybe 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
Instead, I was in there for 2 weeks, and I had to recoup. I was bedridden for 6 months. So
there are lots of people who had those, but there's a difference between you trusting those doctors in December of you said 2020 or 2019?
I think it was 2019.
Yeah, so that was before most people even knew much about the COVID. So sometimes something's new, right? You have to trust, and there's no information to go see. If that were December of 2020 or especially 2021, there's a lot of information at that point.
Sure,
about things.
And you know, the issue of trust, it's, you know, you trust people you know. So it's hard to say I trust this guy because he has a bunch of initials, you know, before his name.
Yeah.
A bunch of letters. He's got a bunch of degrees. Well, that just shows that he studied really hard and he passed all the tests and he did a good job doing that. Like you said, you know, you can get C's and still be a doctor.
That's right.
We joke about it to my kids. You know, we joke about it to them, and we tell them, you know, C's get degrees. You know, because they always want to hit the A, but at the end of the day, you trust who you know.
I think that's an excellent point there. And maybe I've got other calls I want to go to them, but for a lot of people, you trust who you know, right? And that, I think, is how people judge that. But sometimes the people you know are wrong, or sometimes they aren't actually with the best of intentions, unfortunately. But we tend to trust people we know. Daniel in L.A., welcome to the Pastor Scott Show.
Yeah, hi, Pastor Scott. Yeah, I was just hearing your thing, and I think that the only thing we can do is trust in God, because everything else, God has your plan of life ahead of you. He already knows what's going to happen to you. I had COVID back in 2019, the first strain, and it was really bad to where they ran out of respirators for me. So they're like, okay, well, you know, there's nothing really you can do. Take these meds, whatever you can do. So what saved me from that first strain of COVID was a CPAP machine that was blowing air into my lungs. Because if I didn't have a respirator or that CPAP machine, I would have died in my sleep. But I think that nowadays it's hard to trust your doctors because the doctors don't even know what's wrong with you. You know, I've been to many of doctors to where they take a biopsy and they said, okay, well, we don't really know what this is, but just take this thing or medicine and it's going to be okay. You know, so I think that we just have to put our trust in God. God has our path. I am a believer now in Christ. I gave my repent my sins to Jesus. He is my Lord and Savior. And that's what I think I look forward to.
You know, at the end of the day, you have to trust Christ because we're all going to go eventually, you know, of something. But, you know, in the meantime, we still need to make wise choices, and trust comes into that. Daniel, I appreciate your call. I'm glad you're okay. 888-528-2557. How do you trust? How do you know who to trust? You know, when we're talking about experts. How do you know what expert to trust over another expert? And how do you even become an expert? 888-528-2557. Darla in Orange County, welcome to the Pastor Scott Show.
Oh, thank you, Pastor Scott. You know, I'm just kind of piggybacking off of the first caller there about being of faith. I think the way that I process things is, one, even whether it's a pastor, whether it's, I don't know, something that the doctor is telling us, or one, I run it past biblically. I'm going to look up in the Bible. I'm going to see what the Bible says about it. And then I'm a very logical thinker. Does this logically make sense? Because if it's got some holes in it or I've got questions that can't be answered, then I'm going to keep researching. And then I'll look into, okay, well, what is, you know, medically safe? Because I will tell you, my mom, she got COVID in 2020, December of 2020. And she lasted a month with it. She was in 3 different hospitals. And this was when nobody could go in. You know, people were dying alone. And I'm going to tell you that God was the only way my dad and I were in the 3 hospitals 5 different times with her. And his hand only provided that to us. We were there by her bedside when she died. And like you said, God only knows our time. And I see now why maybe, it was her time. Because I'm closer to faith. I know things happen for a reason. But I look at it biblically, I look at it logically, and then I look at it medically. But I'm a strong believer. Western medicine, they are here to give you a lifetime of oil. They are not here to tell you where that oil is leaking from. It is a business. It is. Don't get me wrong. I think they're great for emergency services. I think there's some talented people in the industry and that are led by God as well. But it is a business.
Well, and it's important to know that, right? That things are a business. But that's true with most things, right? Somebody has a job, and somehow you have to question when you're deciding how to trust somebody. You've got to determine, are they just in it for the money, or are they really going to, do they get a better commission for giving me this medicine, or are they really going to try to find out if I need it? I don't like doctors who give me every sample in the world. I'm not even kidding. I went to a doctor one time where I went in for an ankle sprain, and I literally left with some kind of inhaler because I had this little cough.
I believe it.
And I sucked it in one time, and I thought, I'm never doing this. This is crazy.
And the last thing I was going to mention, and I don't know, you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if this mentions it in the Bible or not, but bouncing things off of elders. Elders in the church, elders, your friends, people of wisdom, maybe who have been through something. I do, whether it be financially, whether it be, sometimes medically, if people in that also. But I do. I bounce things off of, have you gone through this instance?
The book of Proverbs repeatedly talks about why it's important to get good counsel. Plans fail for lack of counsels, but with many advisors they succeed. I
knew there was something.
There's a bunch of them. The way of the fool is right in his own eyes, but a wise man listens to advice. That's why I tell people, like medically, it's okay to go get a second opinion. It's okay to, if you think your doctor's not giving you the real thing, or you think they're not paying attention, or they're just giving you whatever the latest and greatest medication is, go ask somebody else. It's worth it.
Discernment doesn't sit right.
And you might find out that they're fine. You might find out that your doctor's giving you the best advice possible, and that's great to hear that. Darla, thanks for calling the Pastor Scott Show. I got to take a break. We'll be back with Laura, Michael, Greg, and others when the Pastor Scott Show returns. 888-528-2557. How do you know how to trust an expert? We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
The Pastor Scott Show returns in 4 minutes. The Pastor Scott Show returns in 3 minutes and 30 seconds. The Pastor Scott Show returns in 3 minutes. The Pastor Scott Show returns in 2 minutes and 30 seconds. The Pastor Scott Show returns in 2 minutes. The Pastor Scott Show returns in 1 minute and 30 seconds. The Pastor Scott Show returns in 1 minute. The Pastor Scott Show returns in 30 seconds. The Pastor Scott Show returns in 15 seconds. The Pastor Scott Show returns in 5 seconds. Welcome back to the Pastor Scott Show.
Hi, Scott. I love your show. #1 show, Church on the Air.
Call Pastor Scott now at 888-528-2557. That's 888-528-2557. Now back to Pastor Scott.
Welcome back, everybody. We're live Monday. Great to be with you. PastorScottShow.com, 888-528-2557. I'll get your calls here in just a second. I want to tell you about Sanctuary Metals. You know, maybe you're looking at the stock market and the ups and downs, war in Iran, all kinds of things, and lack of trust, going on in these days. That's why a lot of people like to put their retirement into gold and silver. I don't know if you knew you could do that, but you can put your part of your IRA or 401k into physical gold and silver. The way you do that is you talk to Sanctuary Metals. It only takes about 15 minutes to get started. Their team will walk you through everything over the phone. They handle the paperwork. They're the custodian of all of it, and your metals are stored safely in IRS-approved vaults, giving you peace of mind. You can qualify if you've got an old retirement account that you're not managing because you left that job or something is just floating out there, 401k or something from an old job, or if you're over 59 and a half. Which I do not qualify for that yet. But if you're over 59 and a half, you might be able to roll over part of your IRA or 401k with no taxes and no penalties if you qualify. Call Sanctuary Metals at 800-801-9877, 800-801-9877. When you call, make sure you tell them Pastor Scott sent you to see if you qualify for a no-fee-for-life precious metals IRA. You can learn more online at sanctuarymetals.com. The phone number again is 800-801-9877. Sanctuary Metals. Past performance does not guarantee future results. All right, 888-528-2557. We're talking about how do you know how to trust the experts. I think that, during the COVID, that all kind of got blown up. But you've got to have a functioning way in your life, even as a society, to trust the experts, to know who the experts are, and to realize they're not perfect, but to have trust. What is your criteria for that? 888-528-2557. Michael David in Northridge, welcome to the Pastor Scott Show.
Yes, Pastor Scott. Good day to you, sir.
Thank you.
God bless. I think the way we were talking, I've been listening to a lot of Bible study, but I've been to Christian schools my whole life. But I know who they are, the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. But you kind of always see pictures of the Holy Spirit like a dove. But he's a person, you know.
Uh-huh.
I wonder what he looks like. Maybe he looks like Jesus. But I say what we should do, because we're supposed to live on faith, just ask the Holy Spirit for wisdom each day to go the right path, to pick out the right people. Because the right people you think might be good, they're not good. Maybe they might be, but you'll know, but you're still going to have to go on faith. And the wrong people that you think might be wrong might not be wrong. They might
That's
be
right.
good.
And
then the wrong people, they might be wrong either. But the Lord, the Holy Spirit will help you make that decision, and you got to trust in Him.
And the book of James tells you to
It's so intense in my life right now.
Ask the Lord for wisdom. And you have to listen, because you're right that the person you trust might not be very good, and it's hard to look past that. Like some people said, you trust who you know. Unfortunately, sometimes the people we know don't know what they're talking about, or they have nefarious plans. And maybe that person you don't trust turns out they're right. So I think praying is exactly right. And then I think once you make a decision, you still want to be evaluating and praying. But the other side of it is sometimes, and this is something I'm concerned about, is that we're so distrustful that we will trust people who are not trustworthy at all because they have some alternative point of view. They have something that is new that they're promoting, or we're just so afraid that we can't make a decision, and then we do nothing. And
the Holy Spirit should let us know about that.
The Lord
right?
will help you with that, and you have to trust in the Lord for that. Michael, thanks for calling the Pastor Scott Show. 888-528-2557. Greg and Covina, welcome to the Pastor Scott Show.
Hi, Pastor Scott. Thanks for having me.
Hi, Greg.
Oh, hi. I was just kind of listening to what other people were saying, too, and it kind of got me to thinking even a little deeper on things. But I started out listening to the CNN reporter talking to RFK Jr.
Yeah.
And the thing is, when you talk about you want to know experts, you should understand the science better, what science kind of really is. And science really isn't science unless it's questioned, unless it's tested and challenged over and over again. And that's when you can rely on it more, when it stands up to all those challenges and all that scrutiny. And the experts have to be willing to, and should have some more humility, and maybe they need some wisdom from God to get that humility to say, I was wrong. I still know as much as I ever did, but now I know even more. And the more that I know, I can tell you this.
Yeah.
And listening to other people, too, and not dismissing what other people have to say about things. I think it's can be difficult, I suppose. Scientists are experts are still only human, but they should be humble enough to let that expertise be challenged.
That's right. And that, I think, when we thought about what happened during the COVID and people were like blocked from going online because they disagreed, or if you questioned the science, you weren't allowed to. To me, when I'm looking for a expert at something, including a pastor or a Bible teacher or a financial guy, can be a doctor, if they don't allow for questions or pushing back, that's a red flag, right? That says to me that they might have a different agenda, or they're not, good enough in their area of expertise. If you can't ask questions, then why is somebody preventing you from maybe getting a better understanding or even understanding the truth?
Yep.
Yeah,
I agree.
Greg, thanks for calling the Pastor Scott Show. And that's a huge thing, right? With science, he's right. Science is about questioning. I hate the term settled science. I mean, there's a lot of things that are probably never going to change that we're probably right about, right? But 100 years ago, I think, they thought the purpose of the brain was to cool the blood. And, you would have lost your Twitter account if you challenged that. If you said, no, I think it actually has something to do with the central nervous system. Germ theory, when you study that, I think it's President Garfield. They say that he would have survived his assassination if the doctor who was treating him would have subscribed to germ theory, which was kind of new. But he actually thought it was better to treat wounds with dirty hands. Like, no joke. And the president died of an infection, not the bullet wound itself. Sometimes people just don't know. You've got to, when people tell you not to question things, and that includes church, that includes Bible study and stuff. If somebody's saying, "Hey, don't question this," it's like, well, we have a word from God. We have the best textbook that we believe was given to us by the Lord. Go to that, know that. And, there's a difference between asking questions and questioning. And I think that's really important. Sometimes we just have an attitude problem and we're questioning everybody because we are the ones who are sinfully distrustful, right? But often we're just asking questions that are honest questions, and the right expert is going to do their best to answer your question and acknowledge where maybe they don't know the answer or where they're not sure, or maybe when they're wrong, they acknowledge that. I think that's a good sign for that. Nancy in North Hollywood, welcome to the Pastor Scott Show.
Yes, hi there. How are you?
I'm good, Nancy. Go ahead.
I was going to make 2 points, if I may. I gave this a lot of thought. I was going to say that it's best when back in the day, before everything, people are talking about free this and free that, the Democrats. I mean, I just want to make a point about medical care. My grandfather was a doctor, and he was a very righteous kind of man. I believe in the Lord and whatnot, and he gave straight advice. He wasn't trying. He used to save patients at his home after he retired, so he was a good guy. He wouldn't brag on himself. I'm bragging on him. I'm proud of him. But it would help if people would realize that with Madani, all this crazy talk about, turning our country upside down, it's going to be worse because the doctors are, like the person made a point earlier about it being a business. And so I'm just saying it helps if you know someone that has a doctor in the family, or to think of getting personal insurance sometimes, or I know that's a lot because I'm not a doctor, but
it's helpful, and we're running out of time, but it's helpful to know how things work.
Right, but I'm just saying if someone has a friend that has a doctor in their family, and also the point about everyone making about God and putting your faith in God, but of course we get discernment after a while, right? And that's where the Holy Spirit lets us know this is a good you kind of know those things. But they're also wonderful. Everyone's coming together for this. Yay. And you're a good guy, so I appreciate you.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Nancy. Thanks for calling the Pastor Scott Show. It's important. The ultimate Christian answer is not that we should trust no one. Right? It's that we should not trust any human being absolutely, no matter how well educated or how well-meaning they are. Every doctor can be wrong. Every politician can fail. Every pastor has blind spots. Every media organization has biases. Every social media personality that people trust incredibly these days, they have incentives for clicks and stuff. And the more crazy you are, the more clicks you get, the more they get paid. You have to understand that. Every one of us is capable of believing something that's not true because of we don't evaluate, we don't discern what is true. Proverbs 118:8 says, "It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in humans." It doesn't mean we don't trust people. It would be impossible to live your life without trust. But it means you listen to experts, but don't worship their expertise. It means respect your pastor, but it's okay to say, hey, you preached this. I'm wondering how this fits into the scriptures. Is this really what the scriptures say? A good pastor accepts that. I've had sermons before where I thought I just knocked it out of the park, and then some old lady comes by and tells me that I screwed it up, and she's right. Oh, that's irritating. But I'm sure glad that she was listening, number one, and number two, that she told me, because I probably wouldn't have thought that I messed it up. One time in a whole sermon, I reversed Rachel and Leah the whole time. It's not that I didn't know, it's that I just didn't realize I was saying it that way. I was glad that was brought up and I could correct that the next week. I think that's really good. Consider what you hear online, but don't confuse popularity with truth. I think there's a lot of things that we can do to build trust and trust in the right people, but do it in a healthy way. And having faith in God and understanding that at the end of the day, if you trust in Jesus, you're going to be fine, because even if you're not fine in this life, you'll be fine forever with him. And that doesn't mean to be foolish or reckless, but it does mean that at some point you can just make a decision and you evaluate your doctor or your financial analyst or whoever, and then you make a decision and you just trust and you go from there. All right, lots can be said about that. Augustine, Sam, others, we won't get your phone call today, but you can call back on Friday for Open Line Friday and bring it back up then. Trust is always a huge issue. Everybody, it's great to be back with you. I want to thank John Fuller and Steve Wilburn and Ron Hill for guest hosting for me last week. And I really appreciate everybody listening and participating. And it's great to be back with you live after a little vacation. We'll talk about that more sometime this week. Just some things about the vacation. I hope you have a great evening together, everyone. And I will see you tomorrow live from 3 to 5. Go to PastorScottShow.com. Follow us on social media at Pastor Scott Show. See you tomorrow from 3 to 5. Good night.